ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 13th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival in association with Nexa at Charbagh. We have quite an A team ready for the next session. We're delighted to introduce session number 75, The Lives of Women, with Bettany Hughes, Jung Chang, Benjamin Moser, Lindsey Hilsum, Hallie Rubenhold, in conversation with Anita Anand, presented by the British Council. We request you to kindly turn your phones on silent mode. Bettany Hughes is an award-winning historian, author, and broadcaster. She's been awarded the prestigious Norton Medlicott Medal for History. Jung Chang is the author of bestseller Wild Swans, Three Daughters of China. Her books have been translated into more than 40 languages. Benjamin Moser, author of Why This World, a biography of Clarice Lispector, was a finalist for the National Book Critics' Circle Award and a New York Times notable book. Lindsey Hilsum, author of In Extremis, The Life of War Correspondent Marie Colvin, which won the 2019 James Tate Black Prize for Biography. Hallie Rubenhold, best-selling author, social historian, broadcaster, and historical consultant for TV and film. Her recent book, The Five, was longlisted for the Bailey Gifford Prize. Anita Anand. Oh, she won it. I'm sorry. Anita Anand is a political journalist who has presented television and radio programs on the BBC for 20 years. Join me in welcoming them.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you. My name is Anita Anand. It is such a great pleasure to be here with what I regard as a rock star panel for you this afternoon. And they're rowdy as well. I don't know whether you heard, but they're heckling from the side. And we have to put this straight because there are so many inaccuracies in history about women. Hallie won the Bailey Gifford Award, okay? Just in case that wasn't clear. Long list, schmong list, she won it. So you've had sort of an introduction to the authors, and I think what we should do is really introduce the books that we are here to talk about. Instead of me doing this, and instead of just doing the elevator pitch, I'd like you to consider what it was that attracted you. Well, in your case, Jung, to three extraordinary women in history. Tell me first of all how the idea came to you, when it came to you, and a little bit about, for those who aren't familiar, who the three sisters are.
Well, my latest book is about the most famous three sisters from Shanghai. They were extraordinary because one was married to Sun Yat-sen, who's called the father of China, and one was Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And Chiang Kai-shek was the ruler of China before Mao. And by the way, the Madame Sun Yat-sen was later the vice chair to Mao in communist China. And the third sister was the richest woman in China. And I came to them because I wrote about women before. I wrote about three women in my family, my grandmother, my mother, and myself, in Wild Swans. And then I wrote a biography of Empress Dowager Cixi, the concubine who launched the modern China, and she ruled China for half a century. So there is a tradition, and that's how I came to write, without going into the detail, how I came to write these three sisters.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the themes that have come up in your books and their sort of echoes and reimaginings as well. Bettany Hughes, the people that you have written about, and most recently, the very embodiment of the feminine, as some may say, Venus and Aphrodite, Helen of Troy. There aren't any witness statements about what they were like.
No.
Were there? No.
It was certainly, it's quite a challenge writing biographies of people who almost certainly didn't exist. So you have to kind of stretch yourself as a historian. But as you say, these are female characters who've endured not just centuries, but thousands of years. And you asked why we chose to write about them. I can tell you very, very swiftly. So Helen of Troy, the most tenacious character in myth, one of the most powerful women in the world, probably based on these extraordinary Bronze Age aristocrats, has come down time to be a blonde bombshell. And I just thought we had to rewrite her story back into history. And Venus, Aphrodite, the same. This incredible, potent goddess of war, as well as sex and sexual love, who has become Venus kind of fluttering around in a pink scarf on Valentine's Day cards. So both of them, I just thought I needed to rescue from 3,500 years of misogyny. So that's why I wrote about them.
It seems sort of sensible to go from ancient misogyny to very modern misogyny, Hallie. You did something extraordinary, and I'm not surprised that the Baillie Gifford awarded you for this, but you took a subject that we in Britain seem to be really unhealthily obsessed with, Jack the Ripper, a serial killer who stalked the streets of London, and you wrote about the victims, who otherwise have only just been faceless, nameless, mostly prostitutes, if you look at the way people have portrayed them in film and book. Why did you decide to take that on? When did that happen?
For the very reason that we have overlooked them for, 130 years by the time the book was published. And in Britain, Jack the Ripper is, it's almost, I hate to say it, one of our major cultural exports, along with Downton Abbey and Agatha Christie and these sorts of things. And, everybody around the world knows who Jack the Ripper is, and everybody's obsessed with solving this mystery. Well, who was Jack the Ripper? And that becomes the most important thing. But at the end of the day, we don't know anything about him, but what we do know about is that he killed 5 real women who lived in Victorian England. And I really wanted to know who these women were. And the more I started exploring, the more amazed I was at their lives and their experiences and how unique these 5 lives were of these women.
You seem like a very bright audience, so this will not have escaped your notice, but there's a bloke on the panel. Ben Moser. And you are here because you too have been concerned about 2 extraordinary women. Let's talk about Susan Sontag, a woman that so much has been written about. Why did you decide, right, this is the thing I'm going to devote probably years of my life to?
Well, it's funny, Bettany was saying, writing about a woman who didn't exist or who was a mythological woman. These sorts of things, the other side of that is about somebody who did exist and about whom too much has been written. In America, where I come from, Susan Sontag was the ultimate sort of goddess of knowledge, you could say. She symbolized intelligence, she symbolized culture, she symbolized a willingness to put her body physically on the line and die for the values that high culture embodies. And as an American growing up and an American wanting to be a writer, wanting to be an intellectual, the figure of Susan Sontag is so intimidating and so overwhelming that it really felt almost untouchable to me. And I had written a previous biography, also of a woman, Clarice Lispector, the great Brazilian writer. And I became absolutely fascinated by this world of the great intellectual women. Even these women who are very famous and very well known and often well read, there's a lot to be shocked by. There's a lot that's not being told. There's a lot to learn from, and I felt that it was really an honor in a way to be part of this revival of the lives of women that we even think we know a lot about, and we turn out not to.
Lindsey, I sort of saved you because you wrote about somebody who, I don't cry easy. Anyone who knows me knows I'm as hard as nails and really not a very nice person. But there was one death which happened of someone who I regarded as a hero of mine. I never met her. But Marie Colvin, for those who don't know, your life will be richer for knowing about Marie Colvin. Lindsey, a friend of yours, tell us a little bit about how you came to write her story.
Yeah. Well, Marie was a foreign correspondent like myself, and we often covered the same conflicts. We were often in the same places at the same time. But Marie was the one who went in further and stayed longer. And you may be familiar with her image because when she crossed the front line in Sri Lanka in 2001, she was shot in the eye, in the left eye, and she always wore an eye patch from then on, one studded with rhinestones for parties. And, but she and I had dinner together in Beirut in February 2012 when the war in Syria was just beginning and getting really terrible. And the talk was about going into a besieged place called Babar Amr. And I was too frightened, and it was beyond my danger threshold. And Marie went. And that was where Marie was killed. And just before she was killed, a few hours earlier, she called me on Skype, and she said, Lindsey, this is the worst thing we've ever seen. And I said, yes, Marie, I know it's terrible, you know, the women, the children, what's happening, but what's your exit strategy? And she said, that's just it. We haven't got one. I'm working on it now. And then the news of her death came a few hours later, the news that you too heard, Anita. And she haunted me. She wouldn't go away, she haunted me. And then I found out that my friend had kept diaries and journals all her life. And I began to feel that this is what I had to do. I wanted to write about her. And so the strange thing for me, I mean, there are you writing about a mythical woman and you about, you know, women who are so famous in Chinese history. And I was writing about my friend, and I got to know her better in death than I ever had done in life.
There is a theme with two members of the panel, which is that you have had access to somebody's personal someone's personal thoughts, their feelings. Ben, you also had access to Susan's diaries.
Yes.
That first of all must feel a little bit like rummaging through somebody's drawers, like some kind of thief in the night. But also, does that give you an added sense of responsibility that someone has allowed you in like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I not only had access, I was asked to do this biography by her son and her agent and her publisher in New York. And one of the conditions and one of the things they offered me was the access to the private archive that was kept in Los Angeles in a place that nobody is allowed to go, supposedly, until about 2050. And it included her computer. And this is really funny. I think if you work in archives and you work in libraries, you're used to looking at letters, you're used to looking at this sort of thing. But one of the things that I had never done before was go through somebody's computer, read all her emails, read all of her drafts, read all of the stuff that she didn't want anybody to see. Now, it's true, ethically, it's strange. You know, she did sell this to the library with the knowledge that it would eventually be read and written about. So, you know, she could have destroyed this just as she could have destroyed her journals and her letters, and she chose not to because she wanted her life, I think, to be understood. But at the same time, going through somebody's computer, even with permission, she didn't give me permission, personally. She gave history or whatever permission. The ethical duty that imposes on you is something I think any biographer or historian is aware of. And I think that oftentimes, like what Hallie is trying to do, which is restore a voice to somebody, or Lindsey's trying to do, which is tell a story about somebody whose story hadn't been told, we're all trying to do this, but every time you do that, you're doing it in a different way. And you're always making choices. There's a way that you can tell a story. You can give me one email, and if I hate you, I can clip it and quote it and sort of mix and match it in a way that makes you seem like a horrible monster. Or I can put it in another way and make you feel like a saint. You know, and you're always balancing these things. You're always trying to get it right in a way that feels ethical and that feels fair. And everybody's different. Everybody would make a different judgment.
So
Can I come in on this?
Yes, desperately. And also, just tell me, you know, because you know her, you care for her. So I'm thinking that there's even more of a personal kind of shiver that goes through, does it not?
No, absolutely, and it is an extraordinary thing to read someone's teenage diaries. But I think it brings us into something about, you know, the difference about writing about men and writing about women. So Marie wrote a lot about her personal life. There's a lot in there, you know, as a child, you know, when she's 13 or so, and she's all these things about, you know, the boy she loves and the boy she doesn't love and all of this stuff. And then there's a lot about sex later on and so on. And I thought, oh my God, am I going to fall into a trap here? Because I read a lot of biographies when I was working out how to write a biography, because I'd never done one before. And I found that with a lot of important men, you know, on page 53, it says, you know, by then Horace had married Mary, his next-door neighbor, who bore him 6 children. And then on page 169, it says, by then Horace had divorced Mary and married Susan, his secretary, who had another 5 children. That's it. That's the personal life done. You know, Mary and Susan get nothing. And in fact, I went to a memorial service for a very important man the other day, and it was almost exactly that. There were 2 wives, one got a mention at the beginning and one at the end. And I thought, and when we write about women, we write about their intimate lives and their personal lives. And I have written about that with Marie. And then I worried, you know, is this wrong? Am I belittling her professional achievements? Why are we interested in Marie? Because she was a great journalist. But oh my God, she had the worst taste in men, and that is fascinating. And oh my God, her marriages. And oh my God, you know, all of the things that she did, which was so crazy. And she drank too much. And she was like Janis Joplin or Amy Winehouse, broken and vulnerable inside and brave on the outside. Oh my God, that's another stereotype about women. And so I don't know about the rest of you, but I worried all the time about falling into these traps and these tropes when writing about a woman that people don't seem to fall into when they're writing about men. And aren't those books about men boring? Horace was so boring, even though he was prime minister and minister of this and that and whatever. And we never found out what he loved about Mary and Susan.
But we know he was very fertile. I mean, that we do. I mean, Jung Chang, you have written about men. You've written about the big M, Mao, in China, something that actually the state wasn't at all grateful about. And, you know, we talk about backlashes against some women authors, and we will talk about that because both of you on my right have faced it in bucket loads. You have the whole of China saying they banned your books. Do you recognise what Lindsey's just said, that writing about a man and writing about a woman can feel very different, or do they feel the same to a woman author?
I've written both about men and about women. And I think maybe what I should say is how I became a writer in the first place. I loved writing when I was a child. But when I was growing up in China in the 1950s and the 60s and 70s, it was impossible even to dream of becoming a writer, because to be a writer was to be in the most dangerous profession, and nearly all writers were condemned or sent to the gulag, driven to suicide, executed. I mean, I wrote my first poem on my 16th birthday in 1968. I was lying in bed polishing my poem when I heard the door banging. The Red Guards had come to raid our flat, so I had to quickly rush to the bathroom to tear up my poem and flush it down the toilet. And that ended my first venture in writing. But the desire to write never left me. In the following years, I was exiled to the edge of the Himalayas and worked as a peasant and as a steel worker and an electrician. And when I was spreading manure in the paddy fields, and when I was checking electricity supplies on top of the electricity poles, and I was always writing in my head with an imaginary pen. And I couldn't put pen to paper until I went to Britain, and still I didn't write until my mother came to visit me 10 years after I settled in Britain. And for the first time, my mother told me the stories about her life and my grandmother and so on. And my mother inspired me to write Wild Swans. And that's how I became a writer.
Can I just ask, I mean, on this issue of writing men and writing women,
yes.
Did you fall, once you'd been bitten by the bug,
yes.
and you have been so prolific and so successful, selling more copies than is decent of your books, but do you go into a different mindset writing about a man? Do you have a different approach when you write about a man than you do when you write about a woman?
No, I think the women I write about, well, no, to say they are quite political, but the 3 sisters were political people themselves. No, I think I just get into their minds. Between these women, basically, I think I've written the history of modern China from the day modern China began with a woman, with Empress Dowager Cixi. Then it went through this Republican period when the three sisters played a key role, and then went on to Mao. And I can tell you, I agree with one of you said, it's quite boring sometimes with men. I think the thing is, the men I wrote about were political figures. Mao, for example, and Sun Yat-sen were single-mindedly pursuing power. And that's how I then switched to write about the three women.
And one thing that is clear, I mean, your books are beautifully crafted, but also they are incredibly well researched, and you can look up where the sources are. I mean, they're sourced, very well sourced. When you are writing about somebody who didn't exist, where are you looking for sources? How do you even go about beginning to sketch out that history?
It's so fascinating listening to you all talking, because actually, as we're up here, and this is the most controversial thing to say on a panel of writers at a writing festival, that I wonder if the enemy of writing about women is the written word per se. Because if you look back to prehistory, when we have archaeology, not historical sources, in prehistory, so around 3,500 years ago, women are conspicuous not by their absence, but by their presence in archaeology. So if you look at all images of all humans made around the world, from around 40,000 BCE to around 2000 BCE, 97% of those images are of the female form. So women are just there in the DNA of civilization. But then something changes in the stem cell of civilization when we move into cities, basically. And that's the point where we get writing. And isn't it extraordinary that the word man actually doesn't mean a thing with male genitalia? The word man comes from this beautiful universal word idea, manu, which is a Proto-Indo-European root, which means mind. So a man isn't a male thing, it's a thinking thing. But isn't it interesting that the thinking things have become men and the feeling things have become women? So anyways, I'm just sorry, that's a kind of, I've just come to me sitting here. But so what you do is you look at the archaeology, and as I said, actually there, women are plangent and active, they have standing and status in society. So it's very exciting looking back to that earlier age. But I think what fundamentally happens, this is the kind of reducing thousands of years of human history to 30 words, but we basically get greedy, and when we get greedy, we want more. And what that tends to mean is that we go and invade our neighbours, and to invade neighbours, you need military muscle. And it's at that moment that not the wisdom of women, but the might of the warrior is what has currency in civilization. And it's at that point that we lose women from the story of history and the story of archaeology.
It's very funny. I was talking to a publisher about the books that were inhabiting the top 10 at one time around Christmas, and there were 2 or 3 by people who had been in the SAS, and there were some about sex scandals and whatnot. And I said to her, do you have to write a man, boom, or bang book to get into the top 10? These are the things that seem to move stuff. I was really struck by something you said about sort of the feminine becoming weak somehow, the thing that is passive, the thing, from being part of something in the foreground to when urbanization happens. And never was that truer than, you look at your subjects. You do write about not powerful women, not the kind of women who change history, but the kind of women who need agency. To tell me why.
I think they're more interesting. I mean, yes, I am very interested, obviously, in what we think of as conventional histories. Kings and queens, generals, the people I like to call this kind of banner headline history, the historical figures. But I think we hear their stories so frequently that they've often just elbowed out of the way everybody else. And I think what really compels me, what I find very interesting about history, is social history, is the history of everyday life. And I don't feel that that is chronicled enough, and I don't feel that that is valued enough. It's not, certainly in Britain, it's not taught. It's not something we talk about very widely in the media, whereas we'll talk about wars, we'll talk about great statesmen. And often women's experiences have been sadly relegated to the private, to, you know, a woman's experiences, well, that's social history, and, you know, it's the history of childbirth, and it's history of marriage, but actually social history is both male and female history. But somehow that's been hived off, and that's thought to be not as important as a male history, which is, you know, what you've just described on the bestseller list, you know, lots of men running around with guns and tanks. So I think the way in which we get into this is we start looking at the lives of the ordinary, and we start looking at women's experiences. But I'm also interested in men's experiences as well, though I just think that women's have been relegated. They're just not valued in the same way.
And sometimes, I'll just share one story, which a very small character in one of the first books that I wrote. So she's a woman called Hertha Ayrton. She was the first woman allowed into the Institute of Electrical Engineers. She was extraordinary, these sort of piercing eyes and completely wild and wiry hair. And she was known in Britain as Marie Curie's Rottweiler. Because Marie Curie, when she won the Nobel Prize, the British press refused to write Marie Curie won the Nobel Prize. They wrote Pierre Curie has won the Nobel Prize. So Hertha, wonderful Hertha, made it her mission to go after every editor relentlessly and make them put it right, and which is why she got that reputation. That's her knocking on the wall, having get it right. And the reason she gave, she said, I have to do this because one lie about a woman has more lives than a cat. So, look, does anyone want to respond to that about, you know, the fact if you are going through source material, if women are written about at all, which isn't all that much, and you look at the balance, that some of it is just lies. Who wants to take that first?
Well, I mean,
okay.
the very essence of the book that I've just written is to correct the lies about Jack the Ripper. Well, about the women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. So we've always believed, you know, you ask anybody, well, what is the one thing that we know about Jack the Ripper? And people will say, well, Jack the Ripper killed prostitutes. And actually, that's categorically untrue. First of all, they're called women, they're not called prostitutes. And second of all, they are, you know, this came about because the time period in which they were killed looked at women who were dispossessed and saw them as nothing, and conflated this idea of the broken woman and the fallen woman. And so it was always believed it served a kind of agenda, a social agenda, that, you know, bad women are punished by society. And that stuck. And that's something we just repeat. And so much about women and women's stories are things we just repeat. We don't think about. We just parrot. And I mean, what Lindsey was saying, I've come across so many times about when I'm looking for information about women in history, and I read the biography, which is invariably written about the husband or the father, and, you know, here's this woman here, she's got a paragraph. Well, she had a full life, and that life would have had a tremendous effect on that man's life, too.
But Ben, I mean, Sontag, there's no dearth of stuff written about her, and it is utterly polarized. You know, I mean, you're wildly for or wildly against. How do you sort of navigate your way through that?
Well, I do think that has to do with the fact that she's a woman. I mean, I want to respond to some of the things that people are saying here. Women are magnets in a way. They bring out emotions in people who know nothing about them and who have lots of opinions about them. And you can say, here is a recording of that interview that you're quoting and it's wrong, and you can listen to the recording and people will still quote it wrong. And this is something kind of magical. It's kind of fascinating that you can actually confront people with evidence of things and they won't believe you. And I don't really know how to respond to that. I think it's a problem that you see a lot with women's lives, but you also see it just in society, that lies can have a life of their own. On the other hand, I want to respond to something that Lindsey said that I think is really interesting about how you would write a male life and you wouldn't put in the love stories from when you're a teenager or the sex bits. I just think that's a terrible way of writing a biography about anyone, because I actually do want to know that stuff. It's not necessarily the person's a woman. It's that I want to know who they are. I want to know what motivated them, where they came from, what they were. It's fine that they won. What was the prize you won?
The Bailey
Bailey
Gifford.
Gifford.
Okay, well, congratulations. But, you know, if I'm reading about you, I'm happy to read that in one line, but I want to know who you are. And I think that's the thing that if you're writing biographies without putting that human side in, then I think you're doing something very wrong. And it's something that in the English language, I live in Holland and I've spent a lot of time working in other languages. And I think if you are an English speaker, you're not quite aware that biography, the way that we do it now, is a very English language genre. The French, for example, don't really have it. They have a way of telling the story of a great figure, often a literary figure or political figure. The idea of social history kind of comes and goes in different countries. But I think that it's part of a great humane and humanizing movement, as you were doing, you know, with these women, quote unquote, prostitutes. It's an act of giving dignity and value to people's lives and trying to understand them, no matter where they're from or no matter what sex they are.
Yeah, Lindsay, you were sort of responding to what
Well,
you
I was just
wanted
thinking
to
about,
say.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you sort of thinking about the sort of differences again, so how have people written about Sylvia Plath and how have people written about Ted Hughes? Well, you know, crazy lady and, you know, great poet. And she was a crazy lady, but she was also a great poet. And he was a great poet, but he was also a crazy bloke. You know, so you sort of, I feel that the emphasis is what is different. But I think that there's an interesting thing now, because I do think that people are now more interested in the lives of women than they used to be, and that's why we're here, and that's why you've come, because it is something which interests people more now. But then that becomes, it's also quite complicated, because a lot of, when, you know, Marie and I started in journalism, and I can see Christina Lamb here as well from the Sunday Times, you know, we started doing conflict journalism longer ago than we'll let you know. But there weren't very many women doing it. Now, we had our predecessors in World War II, you know, Martha Gellhorn and Lee Miller and Claire Hollingworth, you know, we have our heroes. But there weren't a lot of them, and there are a lot of them now. Here in India, I know, there are many, and in the Middle East, which is where Marie worked a lot and where I work a lot, I would say the majority of foreign correspondents and an increasing number of Arab journalists are women. And a lot of them say to me, oh, you know, I find Marie's story so inspiring, and I'm great. However, you know, it's cautionary as well as exemplary, because she pushed so hard. She pushed too hard. She drank too much. She just lived her whole life on the edge, and she took too many risks. That's why she's not with us today. And so there is this other thing about women's lives. You know, how far do you have to go to get the recognition? You know, Marie went too far to get that recognition.
But did she go too far because she had to go further than a man would have to go?
I think there was some of that.
Yeah.
I think that was some of it in it, and also, you know, proving herself to her editors, proving herself to herself.
And do you do that?
No, I'm very sensible. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is always this thing. You know, there's this sort of concept, you know, braver than the boys. You've got to be braver than the boys. Well, actually, I don't think you've got to be braver than the boys. I think you've got to be better than the boys. But certainly it's kind of there in my mind. And I mean, I'm actually fine. God, why am I giving this away? I sort of, you know, journalists, we're all very competitive, right? But I'm actually much more competitive with men than I am with women. There's a bit of me which thinks if another woman gets there first or does a better story, I think, well, all right. And if a man is like, bugger.
I have to tell you, I mean, Lindsay is a household name in England, those of you who are in India, but is also known as a real sister. So that is a nice
Thank
thing
you,
to...
darling.
No, not at all, not at all. You have sort of the problem with, anyway, the general malaise of people writing about women. And when they do, sometimes it's inaccurate. Sometimes you have state revision that goes on about characters. Is the state crueler to women in China, for example, than it is to the men?
Well, yes, can I just make a comment on what we were
Absolutely.
talking about earlier, which is this myth, ancient myth, now I know, of men being good at, intellectual things, the mind, and the women being the heart, the feelings. Well, this reminded me of a story, which was when I was writing a biography of Mao. I wrote it with my husband, John Halliday, and we interviewed nearly anyone who had interesting dealings with Mao. And one of them was Imelda Marcos. I don't know, you know this Filipino former first lady who had thousands of pairs of shoes. So we interviewed her in the Philippines. And she was, she captivated Mao, because when she saw Mao, she was gloriously dressed and so on, and Mao kissed her hand. When we were all shocked by that, because it was in the Cultural Revolution. If anyone else had done that, kissing a woman's hand, he would have been subjected to denunciation meetings. But anyway, then Imelda Marcos batted her eyes furiously at my husband, John, and she said, I can see that this book, it's going to be great because you have the perfect combination. The men's intellect, actually she said the Western men's intellect and the Eastern women's heart. and then she turned to me and she batted her eyes and she said, don't you think that Western men never understand us Eastern women? And so John said, have you come across any Western men who understand you? And she said, only one person, Richard Nixon.
It's a brilliant story. No, not at all. No, that was a better answer than the question I asked. It's fine. In fact, talking of better questions, you know what? I think we've got 15 minutes left. Let me open it up because I could talk to these wonderful people forever. Can we get microphones? Have we got mic runners? Okay, put your hand up. The first one for that woman over there in the second row, please. Let's go over there. Thank you.
Hi. I have a question relating to present times. Has this writing about the lives of women really changed? Because when I read all the coverage around Meghan Markle and how she's blamed for breaking up the royal family, there may be a lot of lies that are being told in this entire coverage. So when history writes about us, is it still going to be the same lies about women?
Can I just say, I love your question, and it also makes me want to cry in equal measure, because the Brits on the panel have literally escaped the country to stop talking about Brexit and Meghan Markle, but since you're only talking about half, yes, clap, Brits. Let's go, Bettany Hughes. Yes, that's a very interesting question. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it is. And of course, we're still peddling the same lies and the same prejudices, and there's something we haven't talked about at all on the panel, which is this very sinister possibility that actually it's not just cultural habit, but epigenetics and genetic memory that makes us prejudiced in this way. You know, there's a lot of work now looking at the facts. If you're not aware of this, there's a really fascinating experiment with mice where a pregnant mouse is subjected to trauma, and she's taken away from her litter. The litter have exactly the same response to that trauma, even though they're not brought up by their mother. So this is being used to suggest that actually we inherit prejudice and anxieties. So as we said, we've got about 3,500 years of anxiety about women. So it's, the change isn't going to be that fast. I sort of take a slightly longer view. I feel quite good about how fast we're moving, although there is a huge country mile to go. So we will be looked upon by history as the moment that just begins to have a seed of turn, but we haven't turned yet. So you're right, there's a long way to go, but I feel a bit more hopeful than depressed about this.
Okay,
let's
do a quick bounce across the Markle Sparkle. What did you want to say, Ben?
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm actually quite hopeful about it. We mentioned Marie Curie and how she was erased from history to a certain degree. On the other hand, Marie Curie, for a woman of Sontag's generation, or a girl of Sontag's generation, there was only one model for an intellectual woman that girls had. Girls who wanted to study, girls who wanted to be teachers or scientists or professors, and that was her. It was Madame Curie. And she was incredibly famous. Her daughter wrote a great biography of her in the 30s that Sontag read. And it's funny, once I started noticing this, or I'd clocked that, I saw it in all these other biographies of women from that generation. They all read that book. It was the only one. I think now, if you're a 10-year-old girl who wants to become a scientist or a writer, you have hundreds of examples out there. And so I think that that sort of visibility, when we talk about that, it's a real revolution. I mean, it's something, Susan Sontag would only be 86 now. You know, so this is somebody who would be older than my mother, but younger than my grandmother. There's a whole lot, I do think there's been a positive change.
And yet, we are, I mean, just coming back to the question about Meghan Markle, we are still, the obsession with which the British press and the international press are dealing with this situation, the way in which it's been written. I just have to tell you there have been so many, but one of the stories was because apparently Meghan Markle likes eating avocado on toast. Did you see that one?
Yes.
Lindsay, tell them about this story, because if I don't, I'm just going to start spitting teeth out. I get so angry. Do you remember the story? It's just
I
awful.
faintly remember it was a headline in one of the tabloids, and it was something like how Meghan Markle's favourite snack causes murder and environmental catastrophe.
Yes. That was it.
It was something like that, wasn't it?
It was a double-page spread on the avocado and how intensive farming was basically bringing civilization to a halt and then linking it to her snack.
But also
So,
the other thing I think is really important in this is that it's the contrast between her, who happens to be what? Woman of colour, and Kate Middleton, who is not a woman of colour and who is married to the other one, William. And so it's the, but it's
the other one, the heir to the throne.
The heir to the throne.
Yeah, that one. Okay, yeah.
But it's the contrast. It's the evil woman and the good woman. It's the, the Madonna and the whore. It's all that old shit all over again. So it's still there. And that's why we're here, because we are trying to write women differently. And you're absolutely right, because we're still fighting all that. That's why we're all here, isn't it?
Do either of you want to talk about? Otherwise, I'll take another question and start from that side first. Have you got a burning desire to Meghan it? No? Let's take another question. The gentleman in the blue tracksuit has got a persistent arm. Let's go here. Yeah. Okay, what did you want to ask?
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, how important is it for everyone, and especially men, to read everything, all the events, that have happened or that are happening from women's perspective?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Jung, do you want to take it first?
Well, yes. It's how important it is. I think it seems to me to be obvious. I mean, a man needs to understand women, and therefore, I think one of the best ways is to read about women, perhaps written by other women, although, of course, the great women have been written by men. We have a male biographer here. So I would say that's yes. But this is also slightly touches on the earlier question, which is this age-old prejudice against women. And of course, in my own case, in the case of China, there is also the state played a very important role. In the case of the Empress Dowager Cixi, who I wrote about, and she has been designated the villain for all the problems of China for the last 100 years. So the ruling regimes have been perpetuating this myth and this thing against her. If you go to Beijing and visit the Forbidden City, you hear all the awful things, how she messed up the whole country. If you visit the Summer Palace, which she designed, you will hear people say how she used all the money that was designated for the Navy to build this pleasure palace for herself. And all that is rubbish. But the state is the powerful thing behind it. And my books, it goes without saying, are all banned in China. This is back to your earlier thing. What I must say is us women biographers, and I think we all have a price to pay. And I think my price was, I was nearly banned from going to China to see my mother, who's 88, who still lives there. But thanks to the British government's help, and I have been going back to China.
Oh, thank goodness for
for
that.
15 days
Yeah.
a year to visit my mother. And of course, I'm extremely anxious. I mean, I wish I could be with my mother. Today is actually the eve of Chinese New Year. And I wish I could be with my mother when she's in hospital. I wish I could just jump into a plane and fly to her. But I can't. And we, of course, both realize this is the price we pay for writing honestly. And then here is back to your story of writing about ordinary women. And I also wrote about ordinary women in Wild Swans. And ordinary women are no less heroic or doing, great things than women in power.
Right. Hallie, did you want to respond?
About, I think in short, yes, men should read books written by women, about women, but actually I think we need to read in the round. We need to read about everybody's experiences from every different perspective, because that's what enriches us. That's what gives us a greater sense of knowledge and understanding of our fellow human beings. I think one of the most important things we have to nurture in ourselves is empathy. I think it's very easy. And back to the Meghan Markle thing, it's just, that's an exercise in complete withdrawal of empathy. I think...
Or sanity.
Or sanity. Just using the royal family as a sort of football, which Britain loves to do, I think, more than anyone else. But I think in reading biography, we learn to understand somebody else's perspective. And that could be on anything. That could be on, the Second World War. That could be on, a particular person's experience of life. There's so many times that I've read a book when I think, my God, I had never considered this side. And then a window opens up, and your whole life is illuminated because you then start to view the world in the round. And I think it's one of the gifts of knowledge, of reading. So please go out and read as many history books and biographies as you possibly can.
Shall I take another question, or you? Let's try. Or do you want to? While we've got a microphone going, you wanted to respond, Bettany, to that? Let's get the lady over there in the middle. Could you stand up just so that she can see the mic? You know who I'm pointing to. Brilliant. Thank you.
So I was just listening to you talk about Jack the Ripper, and I was on a walking tour in London, and I thought it's ironic that you write about these 5 women because apparently the study of Jack the Ripper is called ripperology, and the person who studies it is called a ripperologist. But we don't know the names of these 5 women. Then
we do now.
You've got to read Hallie's book. Yeah, that's it.
But my question is slightly different, though. It's to all the panelists, which is, it seems more so in history, but even now it's true. What is it about a woman's sexuality and intimate life that is so threatening to society?
Brilliant. That is a brilliant place to start, Bettany, and a very, very good question.
It's absolutely brilliant. And if I can, I'd like you to give you a prehistoric answer to that. So if we look back 10,000 years to some of these early figurines I was talking about, they're really fascinating. So a number of them are beautiful and fat and fecund and fertile with big breasts and thighs and a pregnant belly. And if you turn them round, the flesh starts to melt away and you have bones and skeleton behind. And so in that one figure, you're saying the figure of a woman brings both life and death to the world. And I wonder if this is because in the story of civilization, up until about 1,000 years ago, 1 in every 2 children was stillborn. And I wonder if there's just a society's prejudice that actually thinks what female sexuality does is to produce death as well as life. And we've been inheriting that prejudice ever since. So it is not true. Women are beautiful and gorgeous, and we are not violent creatures, and our sexuality should not be weaponized or fetishized. But I wonder if there's a prehistoric reason for that prejudice.
Thank you, Ben.
I want to bounce off of that a little bit and refer to sexuality in the mythological way also. I think sexuality, whether it's female or male, is threatening. I think that it is something, the Greeks write about this, it's a disruptive force. It's something, sex is regulated in all kinds of crazy ways in every society. Because it's threatening. It's the force that's irrational in us. It's the force that is disruptive. And I think that particularly once societies harden into these patriarchies in the way that Bettany has been discussing, there's really nothing as threatening, is there? There's nothing as disturbing. And so people devise all these kinds of very complicated codes. And I think that we're trying to unravel them all over the world now. And it's a work that's been going on for at least a century. And I think that in my generation, I'm 43 years old, I come from a pretty feminist background. My mother, my parents raised my sister and me completely as equals. There was no prejudice against education or against anything like that, marriage, any of that. And at the same time, my sister will always say that she wishes she had been told more how hard it was in a certain way, that there's always this perceived threat that comes from women. And I find that fascinating, actually.
I'm going to take one more. We've got 2 minutes 20, but William Dalrymple's here, so let's go longer. Let's take another question, shall we? There is a woman standing up with her hand, and I like the way you have stood up and made me notice you. I like that. Rise, woman, rise. Good. Let's take that question. Okay.
Thank you so much. So my question's actually directed towards your agents more than you guys, but I'm sure you'll be able to contribute to this. So the question is that, with all the prejudice that there is about women and the way they are, portrayed in the society, how do you sell the stories that you are writing?
Well, your agent is here.
My agent is here.
Right, okay.
Can she or he answer
No,
this
Lindsay
question?
answer. Lindsay will answer for her.
No, what I would say is I actually think that there is an appetite for it now. And I think that we are actually writing at a very good moment in history in the sense that there is an interest now in hearing this other perspective. And that's why, that's why your book's done so well and why your book's done so well, because people want to know. I mean, writing about the women who've lived recently, as we've done, is one thing. But to go back in history and rewrite history from this neglected point of view, I think that agents and publishers are very interested in that. And I feel that certainly with I've been very happy with the reception that my book on Maria's got, because there's this, people are interested at the moment in these brave, adventurous women. So despite all the prejudice, and I understand why you're asking that, I do think there's an appetite for it now.
So how do you target these people? I'm sorry.
No, go on.
So how do you target these people? How do you find these people? Because, they're a niche. They're not...
Who's a niche? The agents are a niche.
Can I interrupt there for a second? Women in every country buy way more books than men. Everywhere, all around the world. So it's not really a niche. Men are the niche.
Thank you very much. And just very quick, I know, I'm going to take another question, but we've got the agent here. Is it true? You can just nod. I can't get you up here. Is there a swelling interest in stories about women now? Absolutely, she says. Right, there we go. Let's take one more question. Stand up, rise, I can't see you. Okay, over there in the aisle. I've got you in my eyes. Let's take one there. And Bettany, you can come back on that one in a second as well. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. So my question is, there's two very famous, feminists in the Middle East, Leila Hamid and Mona El-Tahawi, and they're both sort of dealing with a lot of the same topics and a lot of the same content, but at the same time, they find themselves at odds with each other, like in a public interview, and they tend to disagree with some of the...
Put the microphone nearer your mouth, because we lost you after Mona El-Tahawi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So Mona El-Tahawi and Leila Hamid, and they're dealing with a lot of the same topics, but they tend to disagree with each other at certain points. And so my question to the entire panel would be, how does that sort of, that internal dissent within feminist discourse impact the broader understanding of feminist discourse? And how, as authors and journalists and historians, do you try to reconcile that?
So just I will go to the panel, but Mona I know very well as a friend of mine. And so what that women disagree? Why is that suddenly going to bring feminism to its knees? So what? We are manifold and when we are smart and we disagree and civilization does not crumble because of it. I should shut up. It's not even my job to do this. Bettany, I have no opinion. Delete what you just heard. Right, there we go. Yeah.
Thank God for dissent. I was just going to come back on that thing about women buy more books, which is right, but there is still this absolute tragedy that people buy books if they appear to be written by men more than by women, which is why so many women still adopt names like Sam or just the initials CJ. So let us make it the purpose of this panel that when we return to Jaipur in 2 years' time, that is no longer the case.
Yes.
That would be a gift to the world.
And that is in particular genres. I have a friend who writes science fiction. If you want to write science fiction, fantasy, don't be a woman. And she has had to change her name to a male name. But on your question, obviously, I agree with Anita. Dissent is good, argument is good. I work in television. I know perfectly well that, people like a disagreement and an argument, and sometimes people like what they call a cat fight. You should never, as a woman, when you're on television, descend into that. But disagree with everybody, men, women, whoever. It's fine. Come on, we're in India, we're in a democracy. You lot argue all the time. So do we. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Argue away.
And with that inspiring note, argue away. One thing that please don't argue about is that we have the most exceptional panel to thank today. So our thanks to Bettany Hughes, Ben Moser, Lindsey Hilsum, Hallie Rubenhold, Jung Chang, and can I tell you, the books are on sale. So get there now, get there quickly, and get them signed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers for that brutally honest and brave session, and to our sponsors, the British Council. The authors will be signing their books at the book signing desk located right at the entrance of Charbagh. The festival brochure and flyer with the full program are available for purchase at the JCB Prize for Literature bookshop managed by Full Circle. Do book your tickets for the music stage at Clark's Amer, 6:30 p.m. onwards today. We'd also like to thank all our sponsors, Z Title Partner, Frontlawn, Nexa Associate Partner and Venue Partner, Frontlawn, Bank of Baroda, Venue Partner, Baithak, Motwani Jadeja Foundation, Venue Partner, Darbar Hall, Rajasthan Tourism, Tourism Partner, the JCB Prize for Literature Festival Bookstore managed by Full Circle, Aga Khan Foundation Series Partner, Reckitt Benckiser Official Cause Partner, Diageo Celebration Partner, Jan Michaleski, Zomato DLF, Series Partner, the North India Office, US Embassy, New Delhi, Mahindra World City, Jaipur, Session Partner, British Council, Netflix, Etsy, Public Health Engineering Department, United Nations India, Avid Learning, Murthy Classical Library of India of Harvard University Press, Australian High Commission and Australia Council for the Arts, Paris Biltech Sahitya Academy Centre for Policy Research, Penguin Random House, Jayashree Periwal International School, Air Asia Travel Partner, Save the Children Book Launch, Citibank, Storytel, CK Birla Hospital, LIC, Sotheby's, SBI, John L. Bizzell Foundation, JW Marriott, Airtel, Karma Kettle, Grover Zampa, Coca-Cola, Kingfisher Good Times Partner, Media Partners, Dainik Bhaskar, Rajasthan Patrika, Amar Ujala, Business Standard, Inox, Mathrubhumi, Outlook Magazine, The New Indian Express, The Tribune, Red FM Official Radio Partner, Launchola Podcast Partner, Facebook Community Partner, BeLive Webcast Partner, UFO Movies Cinemedia Partner, Gulmohar Lane, Hotel Diggy Palace, Taj Rambagh Palace, Clark's Amer, Royal Opera House, the Lalit Full Circle, Pratham Books Outreach Partner, Yuva Ekta Foundation, Royal Treasure, EventBot, Edelman, Social Connect, McCain, Unibic, Wagha Bakri Tea, Muskin, Kanha Sweets and BeLive.